Katie Allen. Dr. Katie Allen, good to have you on the program again. The Treasurer says that the budget in just over a week will usher in a post-pandemic shift to debt and deficit reduction. But the government is walking a fine line here with the cost of living pressures and people looking to the budget for some help and some relief, but also the budget dealing with the pandemic debt as well. So when will that budget repair happen?
Well, thanks, Joe. I think that's exactly, you've got it in one. It is a fine balance between dealing with short-term shocks as they come at us, as quite frankly in the last 3 years have come at us over and over again, whether it's the COVID pandemic or now Russia invading Ukraine and global security issues. So it's always going to be a fine balance between returning the budget or getting fiscal repair started, which I think Josh Frydenberg is talking about. We want to have a balance between responding to these really important short-term shocks with regards to cost of living. We know, you just have to drive past a petrol bowser and you can see, prices absolutely skyrocketing, and getting some relief in for people, particularly lower middle income Australians, while they are buffeted by these international affairs is incredibly important in the short term. But then making sure that we have a balanced approach. And I think you've seen that every time we've had to face one of these terrible crises that have happened over the last 3 years, a targeted, temporary, proportionate response to those short-term issues that keep facing Australians and challenging us each and every day.
Yeah, given that they will be targeted and temporary and proportionate, as you say, how will you ensure that people actually feel the benefits of what's in the budget? Because people are really struggling at the moment, and won't any measures actually just be swallowed up in some sense by inflation rising?
Well, I do agree with you that inflation is something that we need to be concerned about. Australia's inflationary rate hasn't been as high as overseas. For instance, in the US, it's been as high as 6-7%. So there's no doubt that we have to keep an eye to inflationary measures, which of course, again, is a global economic impost on Australia. And that means that a responsible government, needs to be considered in the way that it spends its money and get that balance right. So understanding what Australians need right here, right now, and then making the firm decisions for the long term, which means not being attracted to some sort of baked-in economic response that's not going to allow the government to be flexible, to be targeted, to be temporary. And you can see that with JobKeeper. There was calls by Labor to have significantly higher spending for significantly longer periods of time. We had to make the decisions to get the balance right. And when you look at what we did with JobKeeper, I think people saw that we did get the balance right. We've also increased the underlying support for JobSeeker, the historical increases during the COVID pandemic, and baked in longest welfare increases with an increase of $50 over fortnight, which is quite substantial. Of course, we're also seeing just recently that there's the CPI indexation rise in pensions and welfare, which will be welcomed by those who are on the welfare or on pensions. And so it's very important that we are keeping an eye to those who are struggling through what's been a really tough three years. And with the supply chain shocks that are occurring from overseas, we need to keep an eye to that going forward too.
On another issue, tomorrow the UN World Heritage Centre's monitoring mission will arrive in Australia. It's here to assess whether the reef should be added to the list of World Heritage in danger. Now, that monitoring mission was established after the Environment Minister, Susan Lee, complained that UNESCO's recommendation to add the reef to that in danger list occurred without such a mission taking place. So it's now happening. This mass bleaching event that's happening, does that indicate that it's inevitable that the reef will be added to that in danger list? And isn't that a poor reflection on Australia's management of this reef?
With the utmost respect, I don't think it's formally been called a mass bleaching event until there's been 2 of the 4 regions that have been categorised in that way.
Certainly the indications are there.
It's a large bleaching event. There's absolutely no doubt about that. So the thing is that the reef is more than 2,000 kilometres long with more than 2,000 individual reefs. So it's a very large ecosystem, and so monitoring that and assessing that does take time, which is why I think we haven't quite finished hearing from that report. But the important thing is, the Great Barrier Reef, it's in the heart and soul of Australians. It's something we need to work very hard to protect, which means, of course, more climate action. But that's going to be a long-term set of events that we need to make sure that we're an important part of globally. But what we can do in Australia is to also mitigate short-term effects that are occurring right here, right now, and take serious action. So I'm very proud that the Morrison government has committed $1 billion to look at things, or to continue to work and improve things like fertiliser runoff, which actually affects the crown of thorns starfish, overfishing, which can also affect the predator, looking at wetlands that actually act as a buffer and prevent some of this sort of critical minerals running off into the Great Barrier Reef, or fertilisers, so pesticides and fertilisers, which can be a really serious problem to the reef. So there's a lot that we can do locally. Of course, we need to make sure that we keep our eye to it, because Great Barrier Reef is such a beautiful natural world wonder, and we want to make sure we can protect it.
And you say that climate change is a long-term set of events. The government is looking to achieve net zero emissions by 2050, but this is happening now. This is the greatest threat to the reef, is climate change. This is happening now. These temperatures are getting warmer, and that is what's causing this bleaching. So this is a now issue. It's not in the long-term set of events.
I 100% agree with you on that, and that's not a matter of one or the other. It's absolutely both, and that's why I believe that there's technological solutions to our energy supply, to our transportation sector, to agricultural farming practices, to our recycling and waste. And those technological evolution or solutions are coming at us at speed now because of investment of both government and the private sector. And that's where we need to make sure these solutions are commercialisable and scalable, so that consumers can buy them and they're not just sitting in a cupboard or in a scientist's lab. They need to be out, being bought and being used, whether it's making sure that we're using more solar and wind, that we're getting better at using our batteries and the new technologies that are coming at us at speed, whether we're developing our hydrogen capabilities, whether we're developing a proper recycling and waste industry. All of those things have had major, significant investments by the Morrison government, because we know we need to act. And once those technological solutions, which are coming at us at speed, become commercialisable and scalable, it means that we're going to have both private equity investing and making sure that those solutions are available for the consumer, and the consumer themselves can be part of the solution.
All right, Dr. Katie Allen, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks for your time this morning.
Thanks.